Let me tell you something. God didn't bring you this far to leave you in the middle. Some of you are standing right in the middle of your miracle, but all you can see is the mess. You're halfway through the process and the enemy is shouting louder than your faith. You're exhausted, you're frustrated, and you've started to wonder if the promise was even real in the first place. But what if the pressure you're feeling is proof you're close? What if the resistance you're experiencing is a sign you're about to step into the very thing you've been praying for? See, the middle is the most dangerous place. The middle is where most people give up, not because the promise isn't real, but because the pain is. You started strong, you believed big, but now you're tired, now you're doubting, now you're thinking about quitting. But quitting in the middle of the miracle means you never get to see the other side. You don't need faith for the beginning. You don't even need faith for the end, when the testimony is written and the doors are wide open. You need faith for the middle. Because the middle is where the voices get loud. The middle is where the storm looks stronger than your Savior. The middle is where the progress feels invisible. But just because it doesn't look like it's working doesn't mean it isn't working. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean God isn't speaking. Just because you feel stuck doesn't mean you're not moving. In fact, some of the greatest miracles are disguised as delay. Some of the greatest breakthroughs are wrapped in silence. Some of the greatest testimonies come from people who stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. I know you don't see it yet. I know it hurts. I know it feels like you're running out of strength. But hear this, God does his best work in the dark. In the womb of waiting, he forms purpose. In the cave of crushing, he prepares kings. In the middle of the fire, he walks beside you. The miracle was never about the mountain moving instantly. It was about the faith you learned while climbing. It was about the trust you built while stumbling. It was about the testimony you earned while bleeding. God's not finished. Not with your story. Not with your calling. Not with your family. Not with your future. You're in the middle of the miracle. Don't you dare quit. Don't you dare back down now. You're about to see what he was doing the whole time. You're about to walk into the place he's been preparing while you were praying. You didn't survive the storm just to drown in the calm. You didn't climb that far just to freeze on the edge. You didn't plant those seeds just to walk away from the harvest. This is the place where God turns water into wine. This is the moment he makes graves into gardens. This is where your fight becomes your fuel. So take a deep breath. Look back at how far you've come. Look up to the one who hasn't left your side and keep moving forward. Don't quit in the middle of the miracle. The miracle is already in motion. You're closer than you think. Keep walking, keep believing, keep pressing. Because your middle is about to become your miracle moment. The middle is the battlefield where faith is tested the most. It's not the beginning when everything is fresh and exciting. It's not the end when the reward is in sight. It's the middle where the doubts creep in, where the delays stretch long, and where the voice of the enemy gets louder than the whisper of God. In the middle, the thrill of starting has worn off, and the finish line feels like a rumor. This is the place where people start to question whether the promise was ever real. The enthusiasm of day one has faded, and now it's just you, your thoughts, and the tension between what God said and what you currently see. In the beginning, faith is easier. You're fueled by hope, inspired by vision, and encouraged by the support of others. You feel like you're finally stepping into purpose, but the middle strips away the noise. It separates excitement from endurance. The middle doesn't ask, do you believe? It asks, will you keep believing when there's no evidence? It asks, will you keep walking when the path disappears? It asks, will you keep building when the rain hasn't come? The middle will expose the foundation of your faith. Is it built on feelings or is it built on truth? There's a kind of pressure in the middle that you can't prepare for in advance. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up. It disguises itself in routine and frustration and silence. You keep showing up, but the results are slower than you expected. You keep praying, but the answers feel delayed. You keep working, but it seems like no one notices. You're not even sure if you're making a difference. That's the tension of the middle. The weariness of showing up to a battle that doesn't look like it's shifting in your favor. That's when most people give up. Not because they didn't want it, but because they didn't realize how long it would take or how heavy it would feel. But the pressure you feel in the middle is proof that something is happening. The enemy doesn't fight you in the beginning. He waits. He waits for the middle. When you're isolated, when your emotions are drained, when your faith is being stretched. Because the middle is where purpose is forged. It's where character is tested. It's where you learn to walk by faith and not by sight. It's where trust stops being a word and starts becoming a way of life. You can't fake it in the middle. The middle demands your authenticity. It demands your patience. It demands your surrender. This is where you find out what you really believe. This is where theology gets tested in real time. It's easy to say, a God is faithful when doors are opening. It's another thing entirely to declare his faithfulness when you're facing a closed door with no sign of it opening anytime soon. In the middle, you don't just sing songs of praise. You decide whether you believe the lyrics when nothing around you sounds like worship. You don't just recite scripture. You learn how to hold on to it like a lifeline when everything in you is tempted to let go. The middle is uncomfortable on purpose. Because growth doesn't happen on the mountaintop. It happens in the valley, where you're being pressed, stretched, refined. It's where your motives are purified. It's where your vision is sharpened. It's where you stop relying on your own strength and learn to draw from a deeper well. The middle isn't the punishment, it's preparation. You're not stuck. You're being shaped. You're not forgotten. You're being formed. What feels like a setback is actually a setup. What feels like stillness is actually stability being established. The foundation of your faith is being fortified for the weight of the blessing that's coming. But it hurts. Because the middle often feels like God is silent. You wonder if he's still listening. You wonder if he's still guiding. You wonder if he still cares. You've prayed the same prayer over and over again. You've served faithfully. You've done all the righteous things. And yet, it seems like nothing is changing. But what if it's not about the change you can see? What if something deeper is happening beneath the surface? Roots grow in silence. Trees don't shake when they're developing strength underground. And neither should you. Just because it's not visible doesn't mean it's not valuable. Just because it's hidden doesn't mean it's not holy. There's something about the middle that produces a different kind of praise. Not the kind that erupts because of a miracle scene, but the kind that emerges from a heart that still believes even in the dark. That's the praise that confuses the enemy. That's the faith that doesn't flinch. That's the trust that holds steady when the storm is raging. The middle teaches you how to worship with wounds, how to hope in spite of history, how to carry on without clarity. And yet the miracle is still unfolding. Even if you can't see it, even if you don't feel it, even if it doesn't look like what you expected. The middle isn't a dead end. It's the turning point. It's not a sign to stop. It's the signal that you're on the right path. Because anything worth building will test you. Anything worth having will require perseverance. And anything God has promised will be proven in the middle. God does his greatest work in the silent struggle. It's easy to believe that when God is moving, it's going to be loud, obvious, and immediate, but that's not how he always works. Sometimes his power shows up in whispers. Sometimes his presence hides in ordinary moments. Sometimes the miracle begins when everything around you seems quiet, still, and stuck. The absence of noise doesn't mean the absence of God. Just because he's not speaking the way you expected doesn't mean he's not working exactly how he planned. The silence of God is not a sign of his absence. It's often the environment where he does his most intimate and transformative work. When the crowd disappears and the clamor dies down, that's when he gets personal. That's when he starts digging beneath the surface, getting to the core of who you are, reshaping your heart, renewing your mind, realigning your motives. The struggle you're in is not just a test of endurance. It's an opportunity for encounter. The silence you feel is not a void. It's a space being carved out for something new to be born. There are moments in life when everything goes quiet. Not just around you, but within you. Your prayers feel like they're hitting a ceiling. Your efforts feel like they're going unnoticed. You ask God for direction, and all you get is more questions. But if you look closely, those are the seasons where your roots are going deeper. When nothing seems to be growing on the outside, God is stabilizing something on the inside. He's anchoring your identity in something that can't be shaken by circumstance or broken by opinion. He's removing your dependency on outcomes and teaching you to trust in His presence, even when it's invisible. The struggle refines you. It burns away what you thought you needed so you can discover what you actually carry. It exposes the limits of your own strength so you can learn to rely on His. It reveals your impatience so you can develop perseverance. It shows you how shallow your faith was so He can take you deeper. The most painful seasons often become the most powerful stories, not because they felt good, but because God used them to reveal who He really is. You don't learn the faithfulness of God by reading about it. You learn it when you've run out of options and He still shows up. You don't discover His peace in the absence of chaos. You find it in the middle of the storm when nothing around you makes sense, but something inside you still knows He's near. You don't recognize His voice until you've sat in the silence long enough to tune out the others. That's when you start to understand the difference between what's urgent and what's eternal, what's temporary and what's true. God is not just the God of the mountaintop moments. He's the God of the wilderness. He's the God of the cave. He's the God of the prison cell in the midnight hour. He's the God who meets you in the fiery furnace, not always pulling you out, but standing beside you while you walk through it. He's not scared of your struggle. He's not intimidated by your questions. He's not silent because He's uninterested. He's silent because He's building something solid. You may not realize it, but your greatest growth is happening in the places you want to leave. You want to run, but He wants to reveal. You want the exit, but He wants to expand. You want answers, but He wants alignment. And that only comes through pressure, through resistance, through struggle. That's where diamonds are formed. That's where oil is pressed. That's where glory comes through suffering. The silence and the struggle teach you to listen differently. You stop looking for signs and start learning to sense. You stop begging for miracles and start becoming one. You stop depending on things to go your way and start depending on the one who never changes. And in that transformation, you gain something far more powerful than relief. You gain resilience. You gain wisdom. You gain a depth that can't be shaken. There's something sacred about struggle. It humbles you. It exposes your pride. It reminds you that you're not in control, but it also introduces you to the one who is. And once you've seen Him in the dark, you'll never doubt Him in the light. Once you've heard His whisper in the silence, you'll never be satisfied with noise. Once you've felt His strength in your weakest moment, you'll never chase validation from people again. That's why the struggle is necessary. That's why the silence has purpose. Because God is not just trying to get you through it. He's trying to change you in it. He's working on your character, your vision, your dependence. He's preparing you for what you prayed for by making sure you can carry it when it comes. If you skip the silence, you'll miss the revelation. If you escape the struggle, you'll forfeit the strength. This is the place where He creates leaders. This is the place where He develops warriors. This is the place where purpose is no longer just a dream, but a discipline, a progress in the middle often looks like standing still. It's one of the greatest illusions of faith. When you're moving forward, but it feels like you're not going anywhere. When you're putting in the effort, praying with passion, showing up with consistency, but there are no visible signs of progress. That's the tension the middle brings. It's deceptive because you're doing everything right, and yet it looks like nothing is changing. It messes with your head. It tests your patience. challenges your obedience. It whispers lies that maybe you missed it. Maybe you heard wrong. Maybe you were never supposed to begin in the first place. There's a kind of movement that doesn't show on the surface. It's the internal kind. The kind that shapes your character, strengthens your convictions, and stretches your spirit. That kind of progress doesn't always look impressive to the outside world. It's not flashy. It's not loud. It's not quick. It's a slow kind of growth that happens in the shadows. It's the transformation that doesn't post well on social media, but it's the kind that prepares you for the next level. Because the truth is, if God gave you the outcome too soon, you wouldn't have the capacity to sustain it. So he hides the fruit while he deepens the root. You see people thriving. You see their highlight reels. You see their breakthroughs. And it's easy to assume they got there faster, that their journey was easier, that they skipped the middle part. Nobody talks about that. Nobody brags about the season of confusion. Nobody celebrates the days they wanted to quit but didn't. But those are the days that count the most. That's where the real work is done. That's where your faith muscles are formed. That's where your trust in God moves from theory to reality. It's one thing to believe when things are happening. It's another to believe when nothing is. When the doors aren't opening, when the emails go unanswered, when the opportunities pass you by, when the healing hasn't come, when the finances are tight, when the promise feels far. That's when faith is real. That's when faith is raw. That's when you find out whether you're chasing results or chasing God. Because sometimes God delays the results to develop your relationship with Him. Standing still doesn't mean you're stuck. Sometimes standing still is God's way of making sure you don't run ahead of Him. Sometimes He slows you down to protect you from what you can't see. Sometimes He lets things seem unchanging so He can change you instead. And when you're being changed on the inside, you won't always notice the difference right away. It takes time to look in the mirror and see a stronger version of yourself. It takes time to recognize that your response to disappointment has shifted, that your tolerance for delay has grown, that your ability to discern has sharpened. But that's progress. Faith isn't proven in motion. It's proven in stillness. In the stillness where nothing is confirming your obedience. In the stillness where no one is clapping. In the stillness where the enemy tries to convince you to turn back. That's where your roots go deep. That's where your anchor holds. That's where your purpose begins to take shape under pressure. Because the middle isn't a place to be measured by outcomes. It's a place to be measured by obedience. Are you willing to keep walking when you can't see the reward? Are you willing to keep giving when you don't feel the return? Are you willing to keep serving when no one is noticing? The metrics of the kingdom aren't always visible. You can't measure peace like you measure progress. You can't calculate faithfulness like you calculate finance. You can't track favor like you track followers. But that doesn't mean it's not real. Just because it doesn't look like you're growing doesn't mean you're not being stretched. Just because it doesn't feel like you're getting stronger doesn't mean God isn't increasing your capacity. He's building something eternal in you, something that won't collapse under pressure, something that won't fall apart in front of people, something that won't depend on applause to be valuable. It's in the still places that you start to learn the voice of God more clearly. You stop looking for signs and start listening for whispers. You stop asking for shortcuts and start surrendering to the long way. You begin to understand that delay isn't denial, it's development. And when you start seeing the invisible progress, you realize that what looked like standing still was actually God setting you up. What looked like nothing was the beginning of something that couldn't be rushed. This is where endurance is formed. This is where resilience is built. This is where the process starts to produce the kind of person who can carry the promise without losing their soul. Because progress in the middle isn't about movement. It's about maturity. It's about learning to stay steady when the surface looks still. It's about trusting the process even when you don't see the product. It's about understanding that sometimes the most important steps are the ones that look like you're standing still, but are actually holding your ground. Quitting now means missing the breakthrough that's already in motion. You don't always see it, but just because something is happening beneath the surface doesn't mean it's not happening. That's how God works. He starts building before you ever see the blueprint. He starts moving before you ever feel the wind. And too often, people walk away right before the wall is about to fall. They stop short, not because they didn't want the promise, but because they didn't realize how close they already were. The enemy's greatest tactic isn't to stop you from starting. It's to convince you to quit when you're right at the edge. The discouragement doesn't usually hit you on day one. It waits. It waits until you've been faithful for weeks or months, and you're still not seeing the outcome you expected. It waits until you're weary, until you're vulnerable, until you're second-guessing everything. That's when the whisper comes in. It's not working. You must have misunderstood. You're wasting your time. But what if that whisper is showing up because something is shifting? What if the darkness you're feeling is not the end? It's the final push before the dawn breaks. Every seed breaks through the soil in silence. You don't hear the roots digging or the shell cracking open, but it's happening. Every miracle has a moment before it manifests where it still looks like nothing. And those are the moments that require the deepest level of trust. When you're investing your time, your energy, your tears, and you still don't see the return, that's the test. That's the threshold between giving up and going forward. Because the most painful place is often the closest to the promise. The battlefield gets the most intense when the victory is near. There's a weight that comes with waiting, a heaviness that comes from holding on without confirmation. That's where your endurance is refined, not when it's easy to believe, but when belief feels like a battle. When you have to remind yourself daily why you started, when you have to rehearse the promise just to keep walking, when you have to worship with tears in your eyes. That kind of perseverance can't be faked. It's forged in fire. It's built when you decide to keep standing even when your knees are shaking. God doesn't reveal the whole picture, because if you saw how close you really were, you'd stop doubting. But if you saw how much the struggle is shaping you, you'd stop complaining. The silence doesn't mean nothing's coming. It means something's forming. The waiting doesn't mean he forgot. It means he's aligning. The pressure doesn't mean you're off course. It means you're in position. Right now, there are doors being prepared for you. Conversations happening about you. Battles being fought for you. You just can't see them yet. Quitting now would mean missing the answer to the prayer you've been praying. Quitting now would mean surrendering the territory you've been called to take. Quitting now would mean forfeiting the testimony that your struggle was building. The enemy can't steal your miracle, but he'll try to convince you to walk away from it. Because he knows if you stay, something's going to shift, something's going to break. Something's going to be released that will change everything. There's always a delay between the planting and the harvest. That's how seasons work. You don't get to see the fruit the day you sow the seed. But every day you water it with faith. Every time you speak life into it. Every time you show up when it would be easier to stop. You're partnering with heaven. You're declaring, even without evidence, that what God promised is still true. That's powerful. That kind of faith moves things in the spiritual before you ever see it in the physical. It's not about how fast it happens. It's about how strong you are when it does. Because what you're building isn't shallow. It's deep, it's durable, it's divine. And it's going to take more than surface level faith to carry it. That's why the wait has been longer than you expected. That's why the struggle has been heavier than you thought you could handle. Because the promise is bigger than you imagine. You're not just waiting for a door to open. You're being prepared to walk through it with confidence, with wisdom, with authority. There are moments when you feel like you're stuck, but really you're being stabilized. Moments when you feel like you're falling behind, but really you're being positioned. The delay is not denial, it's development. Amen? The reason you can't quit now is because God has already started the process. The momentum has already been set in motion. Just because the miracle hasn't arrived doesn't mean it's not on the way. The breakthrough doesn't begin when it becomes visible. It begins the moment you decide not to quit. You may not feel strong, but strength isn't a feeling. It's a decision. It's waking up again with determination. It's praying again with expectation. It's believing again when there's no confirmation. The enemy wants you to stop just short of what God has already started. But the moment you push past the pressure, something shifts. The atmosphere changes, the tide turns. The walls that looked immovable start to crack. The weight that felt unbearable starts to lift. The silence that felt oppressive starts to speak hope. The struggle that tried to break you starts to reveal the strength within you. The miracle is found in endurance, not escape. It's the staying that produces the breakthrough, not the running. Anyone can walk away when it gets hard. Anyone can quit when the pressure mounts. But endurance is what separates the ones who see the promise from the ones who only dream about it. Endurance is not glamorous. It doesn't always get applause. It rarely makes sense in the moment, but it's the one thing that carries you when everything else starts to fade. When your strength runs low, when your motivation dries up, when your emotions become unreliable, endurance steps in and says, keep going anyway. Endurance is built when you choose faith, even when your feelings tell you it's over. It's in the moments you don't want to show up that your future is being shaped. Endurance is forged in fire, when the doors stay closed, when the silence gets louder, when the wait feels longer than promised. It's not the absence of struggle that proves your strength, it's how you stand under the weight of it. The enemy knows if he can't destroy you, he'll try to wear you down. That's why so many people are tempted to take the easy way out. But what they don't realize is that the easy way out never leads to transformation. It only leads to repetition. You'll find yourself circling the same wilderness, facing the same walls, living the same patterns, until you decide to stay through the discomfort and let endurance do its work. There is something sacred about staying, something powerful about perseverance. Because when you choose not to escape, you give God space to shape you. You allow him to finish what he started. You trust that what he's doing in you is just as important as what you're waiting for him to do around you. It's not just about getting to the miracle. It's about becoming the kind of person who can carry the miracle without losing your soul. And that kind of person is only formed through endurance. When Jesus endured the cross, he didn't do it because it felt good. He did it because he saw what was on the other side. That's the picture of real endurance. Pain with purpose, struggle with vision. When you can see past the moment and hold on to the mission, you stop looking for ways out and start asking God what he wants to do through it. You realize that endurance isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's not about how much you can take, it's about how much you can trust. It's about knowing that if God allowed it, he's using it. If he hasn't removed it, he's redeeming it. And if you're still breathing, he's still building. Every time you choose endurance over escape, something inside you shifts. Your faith gets firmer. Your perspective gets clearer. Your roots go deeper. You learn how to carry weight without breaking, how to walk in fire without being consumed, how to stay planted when the storm tries to uproot you. Endurance teaches you that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent obedience. Sometimes it's quiet trust. Sometimes it's the decision to show up without needing a sign. That kind of strength isn't seen in headlines, but heaven celebrates it every time. The enemy wants you to believe that quitting will bring relief, but it only delays destiny. You weren't called to comfort. You were called to completion. And the only way to reach it is by refusing to give up in the middle. Refusing to abandon the process because it doesn't feel good. Refusing to escape what's hard because it doesn't look like it's working. Some miracles take time, and if you rush out too soon, you'll miss the glory that's waiting on the other side of your grit. Endurance is a mindset. It's choosing to believe that the pain has a purpose. that the waiting is not wasted, that the silence is not empty. It's holding on when you have every reason to let go. It's standing firm when everything around you is shaking. It's worshiping when the weight gets heavy. And in that place, miracles happen. Not because the circumstances change overnight, but because your heart does. Your vision does. Spirit does. The greatest transformations don't happen at the finish line. They happen in the in-between, in the long stretches of not knowing, in the deep wells of trusting, in the unseen moments of discipline. That's where endurance makes its home. That's where miracles take root. Not in the escape, but in the endurance. Not in the shortcut, but in the steadfastness. Because the longer you stay in it, the more you realize God is in it with you. And if He's in it, then it's not over. If He's present, then there's still purpose. And if you can hold on through the night, then you'll see the light that's been rising on the other side all along.